The courtroom fell into deep silence as the bailiff stepped back, leaving only the polished mahogany benches and the cool hush of anticipation. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting muted colors across the marbled floor. Attorneys sat poised at their tables, stacks of documents neatly arranged before them. On the bench above it all, Judge Davenport adjusted his glasses and tapped the gavel once, a sharp sound that echoed in every corner of the chamber. "Proceed, young." "Master Johnson," the judge intoned, voice calm yet unmistakably firm. A tremor ran through the gallery. Whispers rippled among spectators. Lawyers exchanged startled glances, reporters leaned forward, and family members clutched each other's hands. 8-year-old Malik Johnson rose from his mother's side, stepping forward in a suit 2 sizes. Too big, briefcase in hand. His small frame trembled for the briefest moment before he squared his shoulders and met the judge's gaze. No one expected an 8-year-old to argue before a judge, much less to hold the courtroom in thrall. Yet here he was, feet planted firmly on the polished floor, eyes bright with determination. In that instant, every preconceived notion about age and authority shattered like glass underfoot. From the back rows to the judge's bench, every person in the room realized they were about to witness something unprecedented, a child's command of language and law, powerful enough to challenge grown professionals. And as Malik took a steadying breath, the faint rustle of papers seemed to fade, replaced by the singular certainty that this young boy was ready to redefine what it meant to be a legal prodigy. Before the sun's first light had fully warmed the city, Malik Johnson was already at work. In the narrow living room of their South Side apartment, laundry lines zigzagged between low beams overhead, and stacks of legal pads teetered on a chipped coffee table. Floorboards groaned beneath Malik's bare feet as he slipped past his mother, Mrs. Johnson, who sat at a folding chair buried under case files and a simmering pot of oatmeal. "Okay, Mother," he said quietly, pencil poised over a fresh sheet of paper. "I'll be the leasing agent, you're the judge. Ask me your questions." His mother smiled tiredly but played along. "Very well. Mr. Thompson, did you receive written notice before the eviction hearing scheduled tomorrow?" she asked, adopting her stern courtroom voice. Malik straightened his tie, just a little too long around his small neck, and cleared his throat. "Yes, Your Honor." The notice was delivered by certified mail on October 12th at 3:17 p.m., with a tracking receipt signed by the clinic's office manager. He flipped to the pad's margin, where he jotted down the exact statutory language. "Excellent," Mrs. Johnson said, nodding. "And under Section 5.4 of the Residential Tenancies Act, what constitutes proper notice for an eviction?" Malik tapped his pencil against the page, eyes bright. "Proper notice must include the date, the grounds for eviction, the deadline to respond, and it must be delivered at least 30 days before the hearing. Anything less, and the court loses jurisdiction." He glanced up at his mother, awaiting her reaction. She rose and wrapped her arms around him. "You're incredible," she whispered. "I don't know how I'd manage without you." He ducked his head so she wouldn't see the flush of pride coloring his cheeks. At 8 years old, Malik was already her steadfast partner, drafting her legal briefs, cross-examining imaginary witnesses under the flickering living room light, and reciting landmark civil rights cases as bedtime stories. His appetite for words was insatiable. Paragraphs of legal text memorized alongside poems by Langston Hughes, each feeding the other in his hungry mind. Outside, the city began to stir, a distant siren, the rumble of an early delivery truck, and the click of Mrs. Johnson's work shoes as she stood. "I have to go," she said, gathering her files. "Clinic opens at 8. Malik watched her button her coat, the weight of her reliance settling on his young shoulders. He'd seen her exhaustion, late nights balancing hospital shifts and paper deadlines, and understood that her fight for justice was also his. When she left, he returned to his desk and picked up his pencil again. He wrote his next question for their mock trial, pausing only to glance out the narrow window at the pale dawn sky. Every keystroke was a promise. To honor his mother's sacrifice, to challenge a system that too often dismissed people like them, and to prove that even a child could stand unshaken before power. In that cramped room on the South Side, an 8-year-old, Boy was preparing to change the course of a courtroom, and perhaps one day the course of the law itself. Malik carried his lunch tray into the school cafeteria just as the bell rang. A group of boys nudged each other and jeered, "Hey, look, Mr. Know-It-All wants extra credit in real life." One called him too curious, his words dripping with mockery. Malik forced a smile and slid into his seat, mind drifting back to the stack of case files waiting at home, where curiosity meant everything. In class, he raised his hand. "Miss Carter, could you explain how the appeals process works if a judge makes a procedural error?" The teacher gave him a still, polite smile, and then moved on without a word. "Not today, Malik," she said, as though his question were a distraction. In her eyes, his big dreams must have seemed like childish daydreams. On Saturdays, Malik and his mother walked to the courthouse to file paperwork for the community clinic. Inside, a long line snaked around the snack stand, a haven for well-heeled families grabbing coffee and muffins. Malik watched in silence as a sleek sedan pulled up to the curb. Its occupants breezed past the line, waved at the guard, and entered the building without waiting. No one blinked at their shortcut. By comparison, Malik and his mother stood still, clutching their papers, reminders of the rules that governed them. When Malik tried to slip toward the front, hoping someone might mistake him for a staffer if he walked with enough confidence, the security guard caught his wrist. "Hold up, kid," the guard muttered. His eyes flicked to Malik's suit, too big, and back to Malik's small frame. "You're not supposed to be here. At home, that—" Night Malik lay awake, listening to distant train whistles. He thought about the mocking boys at school, the teacher's polite dismissal, the guard's wary glare. Why do they see me as less worthy of respect? He wondered. He knew the answer. Because he was young, black, and from a neighborhood that many chose to ignore. Yet in those questions lay the seeds of his resolve. Every slight, every dismissive glance only strengthened his determination. He wasn't just fighting for the clinic's right to stay open. He was challenging a system that assumed people like him had nothing valuable to contribute. And when he stood in that courtroom, armed with carefully chosen words and unwavering confidence, he would prove that prejudice, no matter how deeply ingrained, could be upended by truth and courage. Late one afternoon, Mrs. Johnson burst through their front door, her face pale beneath the fluorescent hallway light. In her arms, she carried a stack of eviction notices, each stamped "Final" in bold red letters. The community health clinic, where she worked, and where countless families on the south side received free or sliding scale care, had been told to vacate by week's end. A clerical error in the lease agreement, officials claimed, invalidated their right to operate. Maliki set down his law pads and looked at his mother, heart pounding. He knew what this meant. Patients would lose access to vital services, from childhood immunizations to diabetes screenings. His mother's hands trembled as she handed him the eviction packet. "Malik," she said, voice shaking, "I need your help. We have to file an appeal, and fast." He cleared the coffee table, spreading the notices and lease documents beneath the single bulb that flickered in their living room. Paragraph after dense paragraph of legalese sprawled across the pages, conflicting clause numbers, missing signatures, ambiguous deadline dates. Malik's eyes lit up. This was the language he loved most. "Here," he said, pointing to Section 3B. "They cite Clause 3.A for termination, but Clause 3B contradicts that entirely. And look, the notice was sent on the wrong form. See the footer. It's for residential leases, not commercial agreements." He tapped his pencil against the table, excitement bubbling in his chest. "If we highlight these errors and reference the correct statutory provisions, the judge won't have a choice." Mrs. Johnson exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Malik's calm confidence in untangling the paperwork offered a glimmer of hope. As he began drafting the appeal letter, methodical, precise, and laced with the statutory citations he'd memorized, she watched him, pride and relief mingling in her eyes. In that moment, beneath the dim light of their cramped living room, it became clear that this case was more than just a fight for a building. It was the opening act in the story of an 8-year-old legal prodigy who would soon astonish a courtroom full of skeptics. Malik's preparation began the very night his mother fetched him from the clinic. After she left for the evening shift, he crept out to the neighborhood library, a small battered building most people passed without a second glance. Its fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as he settled at a long wooden table stacked with dusty law journals and open case reporters. He pored over precedent after precedent, landlord-tenant disputes, procedural error rulings, appeals based on statutory interpretation. Each legal opinion was a new puzzle. He underlined key passages with a stubby yellow highlighter, copied definitions into his notebook, and sketched flowcharts of how one ruling led to another. As the clock ticked past midnight, the librarian's dim, last call flashlight warning glowed in the doorway. Malik snapped shut his books, his eyes bright with the thrill of discovery. Back in his apartment, he transformed the living room into a makeshift courtroom. Neighborhood kids, drawn by the promise of free snacks and Malik's infectious enthusiasm, assumed roles as bailiffs, witnesses, and jurors. Malik issued wooden blocks as exhibits and tore pages from old legal pads to serve as evidence. With his mother as presiding judge, he practiced opening statements. "Your Honor, today we prove that the eviction notice fails under Section 3 The children nodded seriously, then peppered him with questions. "What about Clause 4? Or, can you simplify that for us?" Each challenge forced Malik to reframe complex legalese into plain speech, sharpening both his logic and his ability to connect with any audience. Late one evening, the phone rang. On the other end was Mr. Harris, a retired public defender who'd once argued landmark civil rights cases. Malik's mother had tracked him down through a community law clinic. For 30 minutes, Harris coached Malik on courtroom demeanor, how to project his voice without shouting, where to place his notes for easy reference, and how to maintain eye contact with both judge and jury. "Remember," Harris urged, "even the driest legal point becomes persuasive when spoken with conviction." He suggested Malik practice pacing, measured steps that signaled confidence, and to pause after crucial points, letting them sink into the courtroom's silence. By the week's midpoint, the eviction hearing loomed just 3 days away. The stack of appeal documents on Malik's desk had grown unwieldy. Draft after draft of corrected lease clauses, supporting affidavits, and statutory citations. Each night, he worked until the streetlights outside flickered off and dawn's first grey light crept around his window frame. His muscles ached from hunching over library chairs. His voice was hoarse from rehearsing speeches alone under the buzz of his desk lamp. Pressure mounted with each passing hour. In the grocery store, neighbors whispered, "Will that boy really stand before a judge?" At the clinic, patients asked his mother, "Is your son ready for this?" Even Malik felt the weight of expectation, both for the clinic's future and for his mother's peace of mind. Yet in the crucible of preparation, his confidence only grew. He visualized the courtroom, the polished oak bench, the opposing lawyers' surprised expressions, the judge's gavel waiting to be struck. He practiced his closing argument until every word landed with precision. When he finally laid down, his pencil late on the eve of the hearing, his heart was steady. The mock trials, the late-night library marathons, and the retired defender's guidance had forged him into something new. Not just a curious child, but a young advocate poised to challenge the very system that doubted him. Malik stood at the threshold of the courtroom, the hem of his jacket swinging several inches below his wrists. The too large suit had been borrowed from a family friend, a gesture of support, but one that made him look even smaller beside the polished oak benches. His small hand gripped a stack of crisp appeal documents, each page a testament to hours of painstaking research. A bailiff's steely gaze measured him as he passed, lips twitching in what might have been amusement or disbelief. Inside, the courtroom felt cavernous. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust motes that drifted like tiny specters above the center aisle. Malik's opponents, two corporate lawyers in charcoal gray suits, smiled politely at each other, their expressions barely masked as they caught sight of the child poised to speak for the neighborhood clinic. He felt their stares cut through him like a knife, but he refused to turn away. With measured steps, he crossed to the counsel table, setting his papers down and adjusting the collar of his blue shirt. His heart hammered against his ribs, but he remembered his mother's words that morning. "You know this law better than most adults. Speak clearly, and the judge will listen." He drew a steadying breath and took his seat. The lead corporate attorney rose first. His opening statement was smooth and practiced. "Your Honor, the plaintiff's lease clearly authorizes termination under Clause 3A. There is no ambiguity. We intend to show that all procedural requirements were met." He paused, letting the formality of plaintiff hang in the air. Malik noticed the slight curl of his lips as he glanced back at his partner, an almost imperceptible smirk that said, "Let's see what the kid can do." When the judge asked if Malik's side was ready, the room's hush deepened. He stood slowly, clearing his throat. The courtroom seemed to lean in. "Your Honor, the notice of eviction misidentifies the lease clause entirely," he began, voice steady. "Clause 3A applies only to residential tenants, not to commercial health clinics. Furthermore, the notice was served on an expired form, invalid under Section 12A of the Tenant Protection Act." A murmur rippled through the spectators' gallery. The lead lawyer's smirk vanished, replaced by a narrowing of his eyes. Malik paused, letting the words settle. With each precise citation, he felt blood drain from the opposing counsel's confidence. As he sank back into his chair, Malik reminded himself that doubt was a luxury he could not afford. In his mind, he saw his mother again, tired but unwavering, urging him forward. He straightened his shoulders and met the judge's gaze, prepared for whatever came next. In that moment, the stifled smirks of the courtroom turned to silent surprise. An 8-year-old child had just reframed the debate, and everyone in the room knew they were witnessing something extraordinary. Malik rose from the counsel table, small briefcase in hand, and approached the stand with deliberate calm. The courtroom hush deepened, every eye fixed on the 8-year-old who dared to challenge seasoned attorneys. Judge Davenport inclined his head. "Mr. Johnson, you may proceed." Malik opened his case file and nodded once to the leasing agent, a middle-aged man in an ill-fitting grey suit. The agent swallowed visibly, shifting in his seat. Malik's voice was clear and measured. As he began, "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell. I have a few questions about your eviction notice, exposing contradictions." "First," Malik said, lifting a copy of the notice, "this document states that the clinic lease is subject to Clause 3A, residential tenancy termination. Yet on page 4 of the original lease, signed by both parties, Clause 3B explicitly states that commercial medical providers are exempt from residential termination provisions." He tapped the printed leases. "Can you explain why your notice cites 3A instead of 3B? Caldwell's face flickered. He cleared his throat. There must have been a clerical oversight." Malik's eyes narrowed slightly. "An oversight that resulted in eviction of a healthcare facility serving hundreds of children." He paused to let the implication settle. The gallery stirred, parents clutching children's hands, clinic staff sharing worried glances, quoting statutory language. Undeterred, Malik flipped to his annotated statute booklet. Under Section 12A of the Tenant Protection Act, the form of notice must bear the official state seal and be delivered via certified mail on properly numbered pages. He held up the eviction notice. "This notice lacks both the seal and correct form number 003T instead of 04C. In fact, the form you used is designated for residential tenancy, not commercial agreements." His small finger traced the statute's lines. "Because of these errors, the notice is null and void." The lead corporate attorney, who'd attempted a whisper to Caldwell moments before, froze mid-gesture. Judge Davenport leaned forward, glasses perched low on his nose, scanning Malik's booklet. Logical precision, Malik continued. "Furthermore, the lease specifies that notices must be served no fewer than 30 days before the hearing. Your own delivery record shows certified mail was sent only 14 days prior. Would you agree that, by the lease's terms, this fails the timing requirement?" Under oath, Caldwell nodded reluctantly. "Yes, that appears correct." "Therefore," Malik concluded, "both clause misidentification and improper notice form and timing render this eviction invalid." A ripple of surprise spread through the courtroom. Even the corporate attorneys exchanged anxious glances, empathy, and human impact. Then Malik paused and lowered his voice. "Your Honor, may I address the court on one personal note?" The judge inclined his head. Malik stepped down from the stand momentarily, turning to face the bench directly. "I know the law is written in texts and footnotes, but it's people who feel its weight." He shifted gaze to the audience. "Children here rely on this clinic for vaccinations, asthma treatments, and mental health services. When I had my asthma attack last spring, it was this clinic's nurse who saved me. Without it, my mother would have watched me struggle to breathe." His small shoulders squared. "We're not just fighting clauses on paper, we're fighting for every child who needs care. Justice isn't about technicalities alone, it's about protecting lives." A hush fell. The judge's hand hovered over his notes. The corporate attorney's pen stilled, and even the bailiffs paused in their silent vigil. Courtroom reaction. Judge Davenport cleared his throat. "Mr. Johnson, your argument combines legal accuracy with a profound sense of humanity. I find that compelling." The courtroom exhaled. The gallery erupted in soft but sincere applause. Clinic staff hugging each other, families wiping tears, even some corporate spectators nodding in respect. Malik returned to the stand and sat, heart pounding but proud. Across the room, the lead corporate attorney rose for rebuttal, but his words lacked conviction. Malik had not only dismantled their case with logic and precedent, he had reminded everyone why the law exists, to serve and protect the vulnerable. As the attorneys wrapped up, Judge Davenport tapped his gavel lightly. "I'll take all arguments under advisement and issue a ruling tomorrow morning." He dismissed the court, and Malik's mother hurried forward, enveloping him in a tight embrace. In that moment, the child genius label felt insufficient. Malik hadn't just stunned a courtroom, he'd awakened it to the power of truth, compassion, and the undeniable fact that even an 8-year-old can wield justice like a seasoned lawyer. Malik stood center stage before the bench, papers momentarily forgotten in his hand. The courtroom's usual clang of pens and murmur of spectators fell away as he lifted his gaze to Judge Davenport. "Your Honor," he began, voice steady but soft, "every family in this courtroom today has someone who needed this clinic's care." He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. Watchful eyes traced his young frame as he spoke, not just as an advocate, but as someone personally touched by the issue at hand. "In March," Malik continued, "I had an asthma attack so severe I couldn't draw a full breath." He swallowed once quickly and pressed on. "I was rushed to this very clinic, where Nurse Thompson gave me an inhaler that saved my life. My mother stood by the window, her face pale with worry, until she saw I was breathing again. A hush descended. Parents in the gallery exchanged glances, remembering their own moments of fear. Clinic staff shifted in their seats, recalling the children they'd treated. Even the corporate lawyers leaned forward, pens suspended above paper. He folded his hands gently over the stack of documents. "I stand here not only as a petitioner citing statutes and case law, but as a child who owes his life, and every breath he takes, to the services this clinic provides." Malik's small voice rang clear in the silence. Judge Davenport's stern features softened. The furrow in his brow eased as he met Malik's gaze with surprising warmth. For the first time in the trial, the judge looked less like an arbiter of rules and more like a guardian of people's well-being. Malik paused, allowing the emotional resonance to bridge facts and humanity. "Your Honor, I respectfully ask you to see beyond the technicalities and remember why justice exists, to protect lives, especially those who cannot protect themselves." The gallery remained motionless, as if collectively holding its breath. In that pregnant moment, legal arguments faded into the background, supplanted by something far more powerful: shared compassion. When Malik returned to his seat, the courtroom's atmosphere had irrevocably shifted. He had demonstrated that true justice requires more than logic. It demands empathy. And as Judge Davenport leaned back, nodding slowly, everyone understood that this 8-year-old had transcended his role as a petitioner. He had become a voice for every family in need. Malik stood once more before the bench, papers in hand and resolve in his eyes. The hush in the courtroom was palpable. Every person leaned forward, waiting for the final summation from the boy who had already rewritten their expectations of what a child could accomplish. "Your Honor," Malik began, voice firm, "we have shown today that the eviction notice is legally defective. Clause 3A does not apply to commercial medical providers. The form used was incorrect, and the timing violated Section 12A of the Tenant Protection Act. These facts alone demand that the court dismiss this eviction." He paused, letting the legal precedent settle before transitioning. But beyond the statutes and case law lies something even more important: the human cost of turning families away from care. Malik's gaze swept over the gallery, clinic staff, families, neighbors, before returning to the judge. In 2019, the State Court of Appeals ruled in Anderson v. State Health Services that access to essential medical treatment is a fundamental right and that procedural technicalities may not be permitted to override the health and safety of vulnerable populations. He closed his eyes for a breath, then pressed on. That decision reminds us that the law exists to serve people, not to punish them for errors in paperwork. He stepped closer to the bar. "Your Honor, this clinic has been a lifeline for hundreds of Southside families. Children here, like my little sister, depend on it for routine vaccinations that protect them from deadly diseases. Diabetic patients rely on the sliding scale insulin program to manage their blood sugar. Mental health groups meet in its conference rooms, giving hope to teens who otherwise have nowhere to turn." Malik's voice grew softer, yet carried through the chamber. "If this court allows an eviction based on clerical mistakes, what message does that send? That bureaucracy outweighs human need, that a technicality can deny a family their only hope in an emergency?" He paused, chest rising and falling in measured rhythm. "I may be 8, he said, gaze unwavering, "but I know right from wrong." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Even seasoned attorneys exchanged looks of respect. Malik held the judge's eye. "It is wrong to punish a community for an oversight. It is wrong to close doors on those who already face the greatest struggles. Justice demands we protect those in need, especially when their lives hang in the balance." Judge Davenport's hand hovered above his notes, the gavel sitting silent. The gallery waited, breaths held. Malik took a final breath himself. "Your Honor, I respectfully ask this court to uphold the principles of fairness and dismiss this eviction. Let us prove that compassion and the rule of law can work together, and that in this community, every child, every family, and every life matters." As he returned to his seat, the courtroom erupted in subdued applause. The tension that had gripped the room melted into a consensus of belief that in the heart of an 8-year-old lay a plea for justice no one could ignore. The courtroom settled into an expectant hush as Judge Davenport reviewed his notes one final time. Malik stood beside his mother, hands clasped, heart pounding against his chest. The gallery leaned forward. Clinic staff, families, even the opposing. Attorneys watched in rapt silence. After careful consideration of the statutory errors case precedent and the compelling human testimony presented today, Judge Davenport began, voice rich with authority, "This court finds the eviction notice invalid on multiple grounds. Accordingly, the request to vacate the community health clinic is hereby overruled." A breathless pause followed. Then the judge smiled. "Furthermore, I wish to commend Master Malik Johnson for his unprecedented legal insight. At 8 years old, he has demonstrated mastery of complex statutes and the courage to advocate not just for his community, but for justice itself." Instantly, applause rippled through the chamber. Clinic staff wiped joyful tears from their eyes. Families rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Even the corporate lawyers, once smirking skeptics, approached Malik with outstretched hands. One offered a firm handshake, murmuring, "You have a brilliant future ahead of you." Malik's mother rushed forward, enveloping him in a fierce hug. Her tears soaked his too-big suit jacket as she whispered, "I'm so proud of you, my sweet boy." Malik hugged her back, relief and pride flooding his young face. In the gallery, a reporter raised her microphone. "Master Johnson, how does it feel to win such a significant case?" Malik paused, momentarily overwhelmed, then straightened. His shoulders "I just wanted to help my community and to show that anyone can stand up for what's right," he said quietly, but the microphone carried every word. Outside the courthouse, supporters gathered, cheering Malik as he and his mother emerged. A local news crew filmed him clutching the dismissal order like a trophy. Children waved homemade signs, "Thank you, Malik," and "Justice for all." That evening, as the sun dipped below the city skyline, Malik and his mother returned to the clinic. Staff greeted them with homemade banners and balloons. The clinic director placed a small bronze plaque beside the front door, in honor of Malik Johnson, our youngest defender of justice. As Malik looked up at the gleaming plaque, he realized that today's victory was more than a legal win. It was proof that a single voice, no matter how young, could echo through the halls of power and change lives for the better. And in that moment, the promise of his bright future felt as real as the community he had saved. The morning after the verdict, the Johnson household buzzed with excitement long before dawn. Through the thin apartment walls, Malik could hear the distant drone of a news van's satellite dish being raised on the roof below. By sunrise, television. Crews lined the street outside the clinic, their cameras trained on the bronze plaque bearing his name. On live broadcasts, anchors replayed highlights of the trial, Malik's precise citations, his heartfelt appeal, and the moment Judge Davenport praised his unprecedented legal insight. Footage from courtroom observers, recorded on smartphones, had gone viral overnight. Social media feeds were flooded with hashtags like "Boy Wonder of the Bar" and "Justice with Malik," garnering millions of views and comments celebrating the young Prodigy. Local newspapers ran front-page stories, their headlines shining in bold letters: "8-year-old legal eagle saves community clinic," and "Child advocate shakes the halls of justice." Even national outlets picked up the narrative, exploring how Malik's triumph underscored the power of youth voices in civic life. Interviews with his teachers, neighbors, and especially his mother painted a portrait of a determined boy who read legal treatises as bedtime stories. In the days that followed, the community clinic experienced an outpouring of support. Donations, both financial and in kind, surged dramatically. A grassroots crowdfunding campaign organized by local volunteers raised enough to fund the clinic's operations for the next 2 years within 72 hours. Medical supply companies pledged discounted equipment, and several hospitals offered to provide volunteer specialists for pro bono outreach days. Walls that had been bare now bore posters announcing free health fairs and expanded pediatric hours, ensuring more families could access vital care. Beyond immediate fundraising, city officials moved to establish a new pro bono youth legal program, inspired directly by Malik's example. In partnership with law firms and the local bar association, the program would offer mentorship, workshops, and mock trial competitions for students from underrepresented neighborhoods. Malik was named its first honorary ambassador. His portrait, suit, slightly oversized, graced flyers distributed at middle schools and community centers. At his elementary school assembly, Malik stood at the podium before a sea of eager faces. He spoke about the importance of knowing one's rights and the value of standing up when systems fail. His voice, once tentative in the courtroom, now carried the confidence of a seasoned advocate. "Justice isn't something that only adults can define," he told his peers. "It's ours too." The applause that followed echoed with genuine admiration, not just for his intellect but for his courage. In the weeks that followed, invitations arrived from youth law symposiums, civic clubs, and even a children's leadership conference. Malik's mother carefully selected one engagement to begin with, a regional youth law symposium scheduled at the state capitol. There, surrounded by teenage delegates and veteran attorneys, Malik delivered a keynote address. He recounted his journey from family living room mock trials to the actual courtroom, urging other young people to see the law as a tool for positive change. His speech concluded with a simple call: "If we learn to speak up now, we can shape a future where justice is fair for everyone." A standing ovation greeted him, and afterward, attorneys and judges lined up to shake his hand, offering mentorship and internship opportunities once he reached the appropriate age. Back home, as the crowds thinned and news vans relocated, Malik found a quiet moment to return to his journal. He jotted down today's entry beneath a drawing of the courtroom bench and the gavel. Though the plaque at the clinic front bore his name, he knew the real victory was in the lasting changes he had set in motion. A community fortified, a system nudged toward equity, and a generation of children inspired to raise their voices in pursuit of justice. And in that small living room, once the setting for his earliest mock trials, Malik closed his notebook with a thoughtful smile, ready for the next challenge in the adventure he had only just begun. Late evening light filtered through the slatted blinds of Malik's small bedroom, painting striped shadows across his desk. He sat curled on the windowsill, journal open in his lap and pen in hand. Outside, the city hummed softly. The distant siren, a lone car's engine, the faint buzz of streetlights. But inside, Malik's world was one of reflection and ambition. He wrote of today's triumph, the judge's ruling, the plaque at the clinic, the roaring applause. Then he sketched a simple courtroom bench and the gavel that had struck down injustice. In the margin he noted a new goal: become a civil rights attorney. His 8-year-old handwriting wavered with excitement. Voiceover. When you combine courage with knowledge, even the smallest voice can echo through the halls of power. Malik paused, considering those words. He remembered the hush when he first spoke, the collective intake of breath as reason and compassion met in that courtroom. He thought of families who now had access to care, of neighbors who believed once more that their concerns mattered. He felt the weight of every late-night study session, every mock trial, every encouraging word from his retired mentor. A soft knock sounded at his door. His mother slipped inside, her face alight with pride, even more radiant than the street lamp's glow outside. She tucked him into bed, smoothing the blanket over his shoulders. Her eyes glistened as she brushed a lock of hair from his forehead. "Dream big, my son," she whispered. "You've already shown how powerful your voice can be." Malik smiled, the memory of the day's events warming his chest. He thought of tomorrow's youth law symposium and the countless other opportunities awaiting him. But most of all, he thought of the legacy he wanted to build, a legacy of fairness, empathy, and the courage to stand up for those who couldn't stand alone. As his mother turned off the bedside lamp, Malik closed his journal, heart steady with purpose. Outside, the night embraced the city. Inside, a young legal prodigy rested, ready to let his small voice resonate ever louder. And in that quiet moment, the promise of justice and the proof that one child's courage could spark lasting change hung gently in the air. If an 8-year-old can stand for justice, imagine what you can do. Every voice, no matter how young or untested, has the power to challenge unfairness and protect those who can't protect themselves. Join True Black Voices for more inspiring stories of young heroes who refuse to stay silent. Hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a moment of courage in action.